I honestly think you guys have got it. I have never seen anything like this. I didn't know you guys are doing this. This is honestly, I'm blown away as a teacher and as someone who sees kids every day with trauma and see people like that have suffered, like their parents, ex-squaddy parents that are dealing with PTSD and complex PTSD. Guys, honestly, I could write a paper on this now. It's honestly brilliant. Thank you very much for doing this.
So, Guy, first of all, how does it feel to be a movie star? One sec, you're on mute. I need to unmute you.
Cool. Yeah, no, it doesn't feel like a movie star. I guess when I was growing up, I always wanted that sort of celebrity status. It doesn't, like, nothing feels like that. It just feels like my story being told so that other people can feel empowered to tell theirs. That's genuinely it. That's why it feels so calm to be here.
Did you try conventional therapies before this? I mean, what sort of process did you go through initially?
Yeah, I just saw someone in the chat talking about EMDR. I had a session of EMDR. That was not fun. It was not good. But I know it has worked for other people. I've had various, do you know what? I haven't had that great success with talking therapies. To endure the relationship between me and another therapist was very difficult. Partly the way that I left the military, I was very tearful for a good amount of time, and I went to one of the medical officers and I told her, I was like, hey, like, something's wrong. And she just said, well, Guy, you're a Lance Corporal now. You're just demotivated in your work role and you'll figure it out. And off I went. And after that feeling, that invalidation, I applied to other mental health people, and I was like, I just don't trust them to handle me in the same way. So in that sense, I was treatment resistant, and that's what you'll find with a lot of veterans. Like, it's really hard to sit there and endure talking therapy with someone that you don't know, even to establish that relationship if they haven't been there. It's difficult to get people to stay and engage, which is why I guess psychedelics are seen as such a breakthrough therapy, because you know that it's your own personal journey, and all these insights are going to come from within inside yourself. Yes, you always have a therapist beforehand, during, and integration way after, which is so important, but it all comes from you. It's all about your own perspective, understanding yourself, and then after you've understood yourself without this little ego that you looked through your whole life, once you understand that there's something deeper, you can start to see how your previous way of thinking was affecting your relationships. And then once you start changing your relationships, you change your world. And once you step into that like feeling of light and love, just greet everyone with it, unconditional love for everyone that you meet, it's like, oh, my world is transformed. And it's just, I'm not saying it's going to be like that for everyone, but that's just my personal experience, and it's been amazing.
And you had several unguided psilocybin experiences, I think, before that one. How do they compare, and what's the sort of importance of having a guide, do you think?
So I was studying psychology at the time at Roehampton. So I felt very supported with my academic sort of tutors, my peer support, my relationship with my partner, my friendship group. And it was at that time I was like, right, I'm going to go to Scotland. I'm going to forage for some mushrooms, which I don't advise. But you have to remember that this doesn't exist here in the UK, and I'm a student. I've got no money, so I can't pay to go off to Peru and have an amazing experience in the jungle. So I took myself off to Scotland and searched for mushrooms in these forests. But if you've ever looked at mushrooms in a forest, they're scary looking things. And I was like, there's no way I'm picking one of these and eating them. Absolutely not a chance. I was there walking around with a little PDF on my phone, like, could be. So I gave up the idea, and I was working in a little coffee stall in Scotland in this field, like earning a bit of a wage with my friends. And just the sun came through one day through the cloud in Scotland, which is a rare treat. And it shone into this field that I was working in. I just looked, and there was just these little chalky white caps of these mushrooms in this field that I was working in, and they were psilocybin mushrooms, and the field was just littered with them. And yeah, I picked them, and every 4 days I went walking in nature with either a friend or by myself. Very like low amounts, nothing huge. And that was just when the first sort of thoughts came in. Beforehand, when I heard people talk about self-love as a veteran, my toes would curl. I would this was at university, would sit in these circles for our counseling module, and girls would talk about just self-love and self-acceptance. And I'd be like, shut up, I can't handle this talk. But then when I was up in Scotland, I started using those mushrooms. Like, I had a word with myself in a tent one night, and I was like, yeah, you don't take care of yourself, or you don't love yourself. And that was the first breakthrough I had, but it just wasn't deep enough. So I knew I had to go and have a deeper experience with a guide.
Oh, that's awesome. Grace, when we talk about things like the default mode network and serotonergic systems and all these kind of technical terms, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Could you break down really simply what is going on in the brain during these psychedelic experiences?
Yeah, I'll do my very best. So, you know, the serotonergic system is, serotonin is one of the key neurotransmitters in the brain, and it's one to do a lot with mood and emotion and things like that. And so when you take a classic psychedelic like psilocybin, like ayahuasca or LSD, it works on a number of there's not just one singular receptor, but the main receptor it works on, which is, as was seen in the film, the 5-HT2A receptor. It has action there, so the same action that you might see from serotonin, so it increasing mood, but then it also increases glutamate activation and production of transcription molecules and neurotropic molecules, which probably doesn't mean anything just saying that if you're not really into your neuroscience. But basically what that does is you get a sort of downstream action that means that the way that the neurons in the brain works is it's a very plastic effect. That's how sort of memory and any connections in the brain happen. And so it increases the plasticity, the ability of the brain to move and form around and form new connections and therefore new memories and new ways of thinking, as it were. And then also produces these neurotropic factors, which basically help the brain to grow. They help, you know, something called BDNF, they help the sort of growth of neurons. And so that further helps with improving your ability to think differently and have new methods of thought. And then when we look at something, you know, the default mode network, what's that? The default mode network is basically the part of the brain that is sort of active when you're not focusing on a particular task. You've not got a particular executive function that you're trying to achieve. You know, it's sort of the mind is wandering, and it's very much where we feel that, you know, the ego is, the self, you know, like I think was said briefly in the film, this idea of this narrative that we all hold about ourselves and who we are, and you know what our sort of morals are and what we believe and all that. You know, we actually form that narrative in our brains, and then we live out our lives and the way that we respond to people and the way that our emotions are in certain situations based off these sort of coded parts of the default mode network that we hold about ourselves. So I've told you a little bit about the chemical side of what happens when we take psychedelics, but from more of a sort of neurocircuitry side, just sort of briefly touching on something very important to PTSD is the idea that we do see some reduction in the sort of amygdala response to some emotional processing, and the amygdala is the part of the brain that is very much the sort of primeval fear response area. But then we also see the default mode network, where it has been sort of very rigid in its activity, getting disrupted. And what we see is parts of the brain that are not normally talking to each other under the influence of psychedelics then do start to have functional connectivity between them. And so overall, what is happening is you've got a sort of brain that's got very, that particularly when you have a psychological disorder like PTSD, like depression, where you get a brain that's very inflexible in its sort of activation, and you get sort of very inflexible habits of thought. And you basically see psychedelics breaking some of those connections, allowing activation to happen between this circuit and that circuit that wouldn't normally happen. And then as the acute effects of the psychedelic wear off, you've almost kind of changed the rigidness of that circuitry, and you can start to kind of rewire with more healthy thoughts. And then if you don't mind me sort of rabbiting on, I'll go on to why that's important from a psychological perspective, because then you get this sort of transient experience of it all. And from that transient experience, you get to kind of rethink what you want those narratives to be, rethink who you are in the context of, perhaps a trauma or, a situation that you're in, and your brain is then supported by the fact that you've got the opportunity to sort of rewire these new circuits, and then you've got that supported by this increase in factors that increase neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. So yeah, I hope that kind of made sense to everybody.
No, that's a great explanation. I think you covered a lot of key points. And I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but how widespread is the problem of PTSD in the UK? Do you have any numbers on that? And how effective are current treatments?
I don't really have many numbers. And I think it's, like with a lot of psychological disorders, it's all very sliding scale. Who's going to say where the cutoff line is for have you experienced a trauma or not? I can speak a bit to the veteran community. It was highlighted in the film there, just the plight of suicide among the veteran community. And that is really bad. I don't think we have any idea numbers wise quite how many people come out of the army with a level of PTSD, but I would imagine it's a lot. But just as far as, the general population and sort of psychological disorders, unfortunately, an awful lot of affective disorders like depression and PTSD do stem from trauma and suppressed trauma that people haven't really thought about, and then it sort of comes out in other ways, and they think it's about this, that, and the other. So I feel that we don't need to just say, this is a drug for PTSD. I feel like this is a drug for a lot of people who are struggling in a lot of different areas in their life. And it shouldn't be sort of packaged up as, this is just a drug for this. It's a drug for, I'm not going to say everybody, but it's a drug for quite a lot of people to achieve a better, healthier overall life.
And Guy, I think I'm right in saying that you had complex PTSD or CPTSD. Guy, sorry, Grace, could you just explain what the complex part of that means and why it's significant?
Yeah, so I think when a lot of people think about PTSD, and when we see PTSD in a civilian aspect, it can be a lot more down to somebody got mugged, or there was one singular event that happened that then gets very sort of deeply coded in the memory, and they sort of relive that moment. And I know that Guy mentioned there was one particular incident that became quite significant for him, But when we look at what happens with veterans, often it is not just about them having this one singular moment when something happened to them. And when I've spoken to a lot of veterans, what they say is it's more about often what they did. And sometimes that's not even just on a personal they, that can be as a section, a platoon, or as, you know, the entire army going into a situation, and sort of coming to terms with that narrative we all hold in our brains about who we are, and then that narrative held with what they did in that situation. And so there is a level of sort of guilt around all of that. And then further to that, once you come out of the situation, you know, you come out of the theatre of war, you're back home, you're sitting there with your children and your family and all the rest of it, and you start to contextualize what happened to you out at war, as it were. That can be incredibly difficult and incredibly disturbing for people. And so the trauma is not just sort of, I need to get over, you know, the fact somebody's going to walk up behind me in the street. It's about so much more than that. It's a much more complex string. And to compact that in further within the veteran community, quite often, you know, with infantry, special forces units, they have training that quite deliberately puts you under high pressure and high stress so that you can operate effectively when you are under that, you know, in the moments of which you're training for. But also, you know, whilst you're out there, you're hyper vigilant the entire time. And, you know, the brain is just not made to be in this super intense, something could happen any moment state for so long. And that can cause sort of some of the sort of inflammation and reduced plasticity, just, you know, from a chemical level that psilocybin can then help with. So yeah, so it's a combination of the environment that you are in war, you know, the sort of guilt and feelings about yourself within the context of war, alongside those really traumatic events that happen that compose what, you know, we would describe as a sort of complex PTSD situation.
Yeah, and I'll just talk quickly about the complex PTSD. It was first a tutor at my university who sort of noticed it, and then I became sort of more of aware. And I think Chris here said it's a short change answer from professionals. Yeah, but it is just that it's bloody complex. And like mine came from stuff that happened when I was 1 to 3 years old, and that there was a death in the family and intergenerational trauma. So you've got very sensitive kids joining the military because you're searching for a sense of belonging. And that this isn't just a isolated incident with myself. This is my best friend. He was in and out of foster homes. My other friend saw his mum get stabbed. My other friend ran away when he was 12. These are my close circle of friends who joined the military. So we've got to look at why people are joining the military who are very sensitive in the first place. And I think that will show why some people may be more prone to getting PTSD, and that's why it's complex, because you've got this underlying sensitivity with big trauma plonked on top. So then you've got to do the work. Well, I'm doing it backwards. Big trauma first, move that out of the way. Okay, relational trauma, developmental trauma when I was younger, through no fault of my family's, just because there was such low levels of of feeling around the death of my mum's brother, and it's all understandable. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that, like, let's look at the backgrounds from where people in the military are joining the frontline troops, and obviously also the officers, but mostly the people who, you know, are stepping out there and in front of everyone else, because I think that's going to be a real key to sort of getting to the root cause of this.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and it sounds obvious when you say it, but there seems to be a selection bias into the military for people with what Ben Sessa might call small t or big T trauma. This is maybe a good time to bring in Keith. Keith, what was your own background in the military, and how did you come to to be CEO of Heroic Hearts?
I was a paratrooper in my military career. I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and very similar to Guy's experience. He also makes a very good point about the people that join the military. I would side with that as my own opinion as well. But yes, fighting in Afghanistan was pretty intense. And I started to struggle personally when I came home, found that conventional therapies didn't really work, a very typical experience, not just for the military, but for a lot of civilians as well. And I'd kind of lost hope. And so right at the end of my tether, I was introduced to the idea of ayahuasca, took myself off to Peru, had an ayahuasca experience, a couple of ayahuasca ceremonies, and I left the jungle, and I was psychologically, I had been healed. So I kind of immediately understood the significance and the power of that experience, what I'd had, and therefore I wanted to share it with others. But it took me a little while to integrate it. We can speak about integration later. But really, I said it in the film just at the end there, that there was, I can't remember if I think it was 2018, but it could have been 2019. There was an 8-week period where 2 people in my community were killing themselves every day. That's a lot of people, and it was driving me. That was very difficult for me. I might not have known them personally, but I was still in my network, like I hadn't met them. 2 people killing themselves every day that mounts up. It's a big deal. And so I'm sat there thinking, I think I might have the answer for this, ayahuasca or psychedelic therapy at least. And so that was the time where I was like, you know what, I need to start an organization where I can get veterans access to psychedelic therapy. And so privately, I started to organize a retreat in Peru. But then I realized that it would be better to do it as a charitable organization. And then I was introduced to a guy called Jesse Gould, who's a veteran in America. And he's the founder of Heroic Hearts Project, the wider project. And we agreed that I would start up Heroic Hearts UK. And that's me as CEO. And it's great to have Guy and Grace and yourself and the other members of the team. Has just been incredible, really. It's been an incredible year. We've only been running just over a year, and it's been incredible what we've been able to achieve already.
So what are Heroic Hearts doing at the moment, and what's on the horizon?
What we're doing at the moment is, there's a lot. So tell me to stop if I keep going. Most importantly, our prime directive, quoting Robocop, is to get veterans the healing they need as soon as we can. We're not interested really in waiting to get people through 12 weeks of psychotherapy and then see how they are on pharmaceuticals. If after the vetting is complete, if we believe that they're appropriate for a psychedelic therapy, then we'll send them on retreat. And we do that through ayahuasca therapy in Peru or in other Central and Latin American countries, or psilocybin therapy in the Netherlands. We've got a ayahuasca retreat on the 15th of November, and we've got a psilocybin retreat perhaps late September, October, that's not confirmed yet. We are starting an ambassadors program, which Guy can speak about shortly. We are also in the initial stages of starting a compassionate access campaign, which has been inspired by Therasil in Canada. If I may, briefly, what happened in Canada is that there were 4 cancer patients that were terminal, they were dying, and Therasil approached the Canadian government and requested that they treat these 4 people with psilocybin to try and ease their end-of-life anxiety. They treated those 4 very successfully, and now they're up to 25 participants. So it's been an incredibly successful campaign. It's still ongoing now. So we're inspired by that, hoping to treat treatment-resistant depression with general anxiety disorder among a small cohort of veterans, but doing it here in the UK. which is very exciting if we manage to do it. What else are we doing? There's another documentary that will soon be released as well, talking about ayahuasca in particular. And I think that might be about it for the time being. I think it would be very valuable for Guy to speak about the ambassadors program because of the audience that we have here today as well. So I'll shut up now.
Yeah, that sounds great. Guy, if you want to explain that that ambassador program to us, Mags has just put in the chat as well. Please sign up to our mailing list. It really helps. And there's a link to the website there, and follow us on Instagram as well if you can. I'll put the link in. But yeah.
Yeah, so the ambassador program, or the vision for the ambassador program, is to create a network of volunteers in the UK who will help assist veterans for when they come back from retreats. By assist them, I mean anything from just, you know, listening to them, helping them integrate their experience just through reflexive listening, or, you know, there's people who are coming forward who already are practicing like mental health practitioners already. So those people may be able to lend, you know, a bit more of an ear in other aspects. But basically anyone and everyone who wants to help assist veterans for when they come back from these retreats. And that, you know, it really doesn't have to be someone who's done 20 years in the mental health sort of industry. It can just be, you know, our wonderful elders, people who have got lots of life experience, and you know, give those pearls of wisdom. And yeah, that's, I mean, there's a lot more to it, and it's great because we're gonna be able to, you know, sort of expand this and help it to grow just through people volunteering and bringing forth their skills. So we're in the process now of coming up with some SOPs in the military, what we call standing operating procedures, so that when people come forward, we can, well, we're designing an app, so you'll be able to, after being vetted, so you might have a nice interview with me, either via Zoom, or if you're in London, face to face, fingers crossed one day, hopefully. You know, just to make sure that we understand that when people are coming to you, there's no ideology being pushed, there's no politics. This is just all about listening to that person and just encouraging them to tell their true and honest story in a safe and contained place. And the bigger that we can grow this network, you know, the better, because it means that if you come back from a retreat and you need a face-to-face with someone, that, you know, you'll be able to go on the app and see, oh, look, Joe Mallet is in Essex or whatever, and she's free for a cup of tea on a Saturday between 11 and 4. Yeah, I'll go around and you know, and say hello and talk out my experience. So just a really wholesome, lovely network of willing volunteers. But yeah, it'll be a couple of months before that's up and running, before I can start onboarding people onto the app and stuff. But yeah, don't hesitate to give me an email, or to give us an email at Heroic Hearts on the website. And yeah, just look forward to leaking more information to you soon, and getting people signed up and having some more interviews and saying hello.
I think it's important to reiterate that point that Guy made there, is that you don't have to have, and I've just seen it come up on a chat, you don't have to have experience with psychedelic therapy yourself as a volunteer, and you don't have to be qualified as a psychotherapist or something like that. You could just be another veteran who's happy to have a cup of tea and listen to someone talk. Another important point is that we do, Heroic Hearts, I'm speaking about now, we do actually offer preparatory training and integration training to the participants on the retreats. What we're talking about with Ambassadors program here is actually in addition to that, after that, is that there's someone, that group integration coaching will be done online. and the benefit of having an ambassadors program, an ambassadors network across the UK, is that there's someone physically in your town or nearby, and that can be very valuable. So it's really exciting to get this network across the UK of people that are interested in serving in some small way and helping some of our service users.
And just to answer Kat in the chat, how do you foresee managing safeguarding for both veteran and volunteers? Great question. But so the veterans would have gone through a massive amount of vetting. They will have support from the retreat, from the management and more senior level, and then also the ambassadors program. And then those people who are volunteering their time, they'll be able to sort of document that time, or say that, when they're having visits, and it's it'll be a very, people will be communicating the whole time back and forth.
Yeah, we've got a pretty strict vetting process, both for participants, or like applicants, not even participants, for applicants, both as service users, but also, as Guy just said, there's the for anyone that's offering their services, they'll have to go through a vetting process as well. But it's still an exciting time to have people volunteering, because I think everyone's coming to understand, not everyone, that's an exaggeration. There's a growing number of people in the wider society that are beginning to get a whisper that psychedelic therapy is genuine and is perhaps more powerful than anything that we've got currently in our toolbox for mental health treatment, which everyone in our team believes that that's absolutely true, and there's some good evidence to support that for sure.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. I really hope we can get this sort of network up and running. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll go to audience Q&A. So if you guys have a question, if you raise your hand, so you press reactions and then raise hand, and then I'll come to you in turn. But Keith and Guy, what's your feeling on sort of how this is received at the moment within the veteran community and the military more generally?
Can I go first, Guy?
Yeah, go on, boss man.
The military. So, interestingly, privately, when I first started this, a general that I know, that sounds very grand, he's just a former commanding officer of mine, who's now a general. He was very, very supportive of the idea of this whole idea, but publicly, yeah, he couldn't go anywhere near me, anywhere near us as an organization. But I'm beginning to hear that there are conversations being had in the higher ranks within the military, that this might be an option. They're not getting excited by any stretch of the imagination, but there are conversations, I understand, that are being had. So that's in the higher ranks of the military. I think in the veterans network, at kind of our level where we're operating, there's still a lot of pushback. I've had some difficult messages on social media when I was first starting Heroic Hearts. I should have known better than to get involved. But yeah, a lot of veterans are skeptical, to say the least. So we've got a lot of work. We've got a lot of work to do. But all we can do is reach out as far as we can, and whoever feels that we can be of service, if they pass the vetting process, then they're in. So, what more can we do?
Yeah, and just, like the immediate friendship circle that I have from the military, like all my mates are super supportive, and everyone's really, well, I've got a lot of friends who come forward and they're keen to give it a go themselves. Of course, it's not that simple, but yeah, like why, if they watch the documentary, they've just seen the way that I've changed, my self-esteem has risen, and the way that I'm engaging with the world compared to where I was, like there's just no judgment there. And I think it's so, that's how it will slowly spread. But hopefully it will be me on the other side of a camera with many more veterans telling their individual stories. That's where I want to be, because veteran stories are so powerful. but is, you know, and it's not just, but that's not, someone here was in the comments was saying, I understand the importance of treating PTSD just in the military, but what about civilian access? This is like, we're talking civilian access as well. This is not an exclusion at all, but there is a lot that lies in a story of a veteran as well. There's a sort of, I don't know, to drive the movement forward, there's sort of all these connected people already with powerful stories. And I think that in terms of the psychedelic movement, as you know, slow and steady as we take it, I think it can just be a very powerful way to speak into politicians who sent us to Afghanistan. It's, you know, like where's, you know, there's got to be morals and ethics questioned there. So yeah,
it's the thing, the why we're doing this for veterans is, yes, we're military veterans ourselves, but Heroic Hearts is open to emergency services veterans as well, because police, firefighters, ambulance drivers, we all experience very similar traumatic situations. Also, I've also found that elite sporting athletes also struggle in very similar ways, which might sound surprising to some, but actually when a veteran leaves the military, that lack of purpose and that lack of self-worth is a massive part of the problem. And when an elite athlete finishes their career, they actually feel very similar. They've got no self-worth anymore. Their whole self-worth was attached to their profession. And when they're not that professional anymore, they dive bomb. So we're finding that elite sports athletes are actually a very natural addition to our group. We can't open it up too much further to the whole of society because we're only a small organization at the moment. And perhaps more importantly at this point is because veterans, I believe, are a great barometer for mental health treatments. If it works, and we're generally a well-regarded, well-respected community cross-section of society. So if we, with our traumas, we go and test these therapies and we get healed, then that's a great barometer for wider society. So hence, yeah, we can't open it up to everyone because of time and energy constraints, but we do believe that society will be changed profoundly by psychedelic therapy, profoundly, all aspects.
Will Bartho has raised his hand. So Will, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thanks, Casper. Yeah, thanks very much to everyone who's spoken. I just wanted to say that so I'm a veteran. I've got a complex PTSD diagnosis, and I was a helicopter pilot in Afghanistan. I might have flown a guy around at some point, who knows? And so that complex thing was quite interesting for me. So for me, I'm amazed and to hear about Heroic Hearts, and but equally to apply to go on a retreat ayahuasca is probably quite a big step for me. I've got a family and so on. What I'd be interested in is there support for that integration? Because that's the piece that I've learned along the way that, of course, is so important.
That's a really good point. There are, sorry, if you don't mind me just answering this briefly. There are actually, Liam Modlin. Liam is, I believe, an Israeli vet. He works out of King's, and he runs, I think it's a weekly, or it might be a monthly, I'm not quite sure, but he runs a regular psychedelic integration group, public group, and he's not the only one, you know. And then to further answer your question is that this is where our ambassadors program really would kick in, because then you would be able to approach certain people on the ambassadors network that are qualified to offer that sort of therapy, that sort of service. So really good question. Hopefully that's of some help. If you need more information about that, you can just contact us through the website and I'll connect you, or I'll give you as much information as I can find.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Lucy Vernon. Lucy, can you? Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening there. Phil put something in the chat, which he said, is the treatment ongoing after you've had the experience? And I just wanted to, I guess, amend that or change that to ask Keith and Guy, and maybe Will as well, whether you feel cured now, or whether it's still an ongoing process, or whether that's even the right question to ask.
So I'll just quickly say my experience. The big trauma is out of the way, but I still have a psychotherapist, and I go and speak to him, and he'll try and bring everything back around to Afghanistan. I'm an open book around that trauma now. Like I can say anything without going into any depth of like emotion. I don't have nightmares anymore. Like I don't wake up in cold sweats, which means that I use alcohol less, I use recreational drugs less or more responsibly. So once the big trauma's moved, but once it did move, I realized I had ADD, or I was neurodivergent, which has been massively brought up in COVID. So the integration from Barcelona is still going a year and a half later. Like I'm still unpacking. It's more for the fact that in these psychedelic experiences, when you have these breakthroughs, it's like everything suddenly aligns, and you start talking through truth and authenticity from yourself, and you just remove the bullshit. You just you don't have these survival mechanisms, or you might still have some of them as your ego builds back up, but you're just a lot more honest with yourself. And then once you're being completely honest with yourself, and you're not scared to look into the places where you used to fear, then as you start bringing up this repressed shadow side of yourself and question it, like, oh, like, why am I smoking? Like, I hate the taste of smoking. Like, why am I doing it? Oh, it's because every 20 minutes or so, you get this feeling of frustration or boredom when you're doing work. Okay, then why is it a cigarette? Well, okay, don't have a cigarette, go for a walk and eat a piece of fruit. Like, you want to look after your body now. And it's just like, just slowly but surely, because I'm now connecting with mind and body, I know what I want to do. And it's not the stuff that will endanger my life any further. It's not risky behavior. It's not, high amounts of binging alcohol on the weekend. It's like, right, how can I now live a long and healthy life? Like, that's cool to me now. So it's been a massive process of maturation, if anything, and initiation into becoming an adult, and that affects my relationships, like with my partner and everything else. So it's just so transformative if you get there. And of course, I am, like, my story seen as a bit of a success story, but I do believe that with adequate pre-therapy, the right retreat, and the right post-therapy, like, everyone can move forward. And that, like, I'm healed of my big trauma, but I'm not gonna lie, like, I know I've got a lifetime of work to heal from stuff that's happened neurologically, or at least live with it, like the way that my mind works in a better way. And actually, I love my brain now. It's innovative, it's creative, it's imaginative. Like, my ADD is like part of my power. It's just not so great when you're stuck at home trying to do a dissertation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, really. There's the big T trauma, and then there's the small T trauma, and just because we're veterans, we don't own either of those labels. Plenty of other people have them. And so the work does still go on, because life brings new challenges. But you might not necessarily, I suppose what's important here is that, let's use Guy's experience here, is that you have big T trauma, like I did, and you heal from that. What is possible and what's beautiful about psychedelics is that, again, actually, just from my experience, I won't generalize, just my experience, is that you get given the tools for working with life from then on. So I was healed from my big T trauma. And then moving forward, I had the tools that I needed. So ayahuasca, she taught me these tools and behaviors whereby I would be far less likely to experience more trauma. That doesn't mean to say that it keeps you safe from life's random events, or seemingly random events. It's just that you're better equipped to deal with it. And Guy actually alluded to that himself already, actually. So I'm just repeating everything he said. Do you mind if I just carry on here? Lucy has just written something here about sexual trauma. Heroic Hearts in the US are, so while Heroic Hearts UK, we're open to emergency services and military veterans. I know it might not be much help to you, Lucy, but Heroic Hearts US are open to vets with sexual trauma. And so, much like Grace was saying earlier, it's not about, oh, ayahuasca, psilocybin, MDMA, or whatever is a cure for, or a potential cure for PTSD or complex PTSD or anything, any specific diagnosis. It can treat a vast array of issues and disorders and the underlying issues. So while it may feel like the trauma is too intense and too much to be ever expected to be healed, my experience and the experience of many, many other people around the world is that they have healed from particularly significant trauma. And there's no reason why you can't also heal from that trauma.
So Kat has asked a question, which is maybe a good one for Grace to address. Asking, is my connection all right? Asking, what is the risk of a bad trip and therefore a counterproductive experience?
Yeah, I think the risk of a bad trip is something that we all need to be aware of as, something that can happen. As I slightly alluded to earlier, these drugs are not for everyone. There are some people who just really don't tolerate them very well. And so my advice really on a bad trip is definitely got to come down to the idea of set and setting, which I'm sure a lot of you will have heard before. So that's sort of the setting that you are in, the environment immediately around you at the time that you're doing the drug, and the people that are going to be there to support you through the experience. And the set is your mindset at that time. If you go into a psychedelic experience in quite an acutely distressed state, this is not like taking a sedative. It's not going to bring you down from that distressed state. It will probably actually alleviate that and make the likelihood of you having a bad trip worse. So they certainly shouldn't be used in that kind of setting. And then also you need to just have done the preparatory work for when you're in the state. So when you're there, it's not super easy to then work out, okay, what do I need to kind of do and think about and all the rest of it. So being super mindful about why you're taking it, and also who you're taking it with, and the environment that you're in is a huge mediator of that risk of having a bad trip, and making sure you've sort of done your homework on dosage and all the rest of it. And I suppose that would be my sort of maximum advice. There's no sort of hard and fast definite on why some people have bad trips and why they don't, but proper preparation should mitigate the majority of the risk on that.
Yeah, agreed. And I would add, I just put it in the text there. These are not mutually exclusive points, everything that Grace said, I believe. But just because you're having a bad trip doesn't mean that you're not getting healed. People always like, oh, I had a really bad trip. But again, if you take what advice Grace has just given there, which is absolutely correct, you still might have a bad trip. It might be incredibly difficult, but that doesn't mean that you're not being healed of your trauma. Anyone who expects their healing process to be easy and pleasant is going to be shocked and surprised. It's a difficult, healing is the hardest thing that we can do. And so to expect it to be nice and unicorns and rainbows is nonsense. It's going to be hard. hard work. But again, with everything that Grace just said, preparation, the right setting with the right support network, and then the correct integration afterwards, you will highly likely get the healing that you need. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy or pleasant.
Yeah, sorry, just to jump in, completely agree with Keith there on the idea that sort of all trips are beneficial, and sort of this comes back to the idea of, you know, is this going to be suddenly you just take this drug and then you're cured? Like it's certainly a huge catalyst to psychotherapy and helping people to heal, but it is not some kind of wonder drug that you just take it and then you're healed. There is a lot of work to be done, and that work comes from you. And a lot of that work is not going to be easy. You know, what we're talking about here is, you know, traumatic things that have happened to people. And although there is a, you know, huge blunting from the drug in the initial sort of emotional response of thinking about the trauma, which is what makes these drugs so useful for accessing trauma, it's still not, you're still going to have to access it. You still have to go back through, you know, all of the, you know, baggage. I don't really want to say the word baggage, but you still got to go back through all of that stuff and do the work to integrate that into your psyche, and all the rest of it. And so, yeah, what is a bad trip? Well, what is a good trip? You know, we're not advocating that these drugs are some kind of, you know, you're going to have a party. That's really not their intention.
Chris, I think, wants to weigh in on this. So Chris, if you want to unmute and ask your question or comment.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Chris. I joined the army and we all got sent away. You know, that's what we did. We joined the army for that reason. We all went to Iraq. We went to Afghanistan. I went there as a combat medic. Saw a lot of stuff that I have somehow managed to put to bed, but other people haven't. But they've seen. They haven't seen as much. And when Guy was talking about before this, this relational trauma, and like certain personalities that can't cope with that. It's strange. As squaddies, we were all brothers, and it doesn't matter if we were never worked together. We came together as randoms when we were deployed or we were posted into a new unit. You had your initiation bowl of whatever it was, with bus tickets and train tickets and alcohol gel, and you just drank it. You know, you were just brothers. And I think having if you did send a load of brothers for this, you know, this retreat, that bad trips really, I don't think that could happen, because you're in that safe place. You're all, and that was the thing back then in the 90s, it was being together. But like all I can say is, like, now I would recommend that using psychotherapy with these other psychedelic drugs, I'd say, but with art and design. I think you're going to open up a lot more doors. Painting for me has just been a continuation of therapy for me. I don't think I've ever not been in therapy as an art teacher now since leaving the army. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. But other than that, like, I take my hats off to anybody that's struggling right now. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I honestly think you guys have got it. I have never seen anything like this. I didn't know you guys are doing this. This is honestly, I'm blown away as a teacher and as someone who sees kids every day with trauma, and see people like that have suffered, like their parents, ex-squaddy parents that are dealing with PTSD and complex PTSD. Guys, honestly, I could write a paper on this now. It's honestly brilliant. Thank you very much for doing this.
Wow, that's
Cheers, Chris.
amazing.
That was really lovely and heartfelt.
Yeah. Thank you for being so vulnerable as well, and so honest and sharing your story.
Hey, it's fine. I'll top the hind legs of a donkey, but that's cool. Thanks.
And I'd just like to make an observation. My dissertation, I've been interviewing mental health professionals who use psychedelics in their private life, with the idea to talk about love, affect, or emotion, and touch, and sort of understand why psychotherapists are using them themselves to inform their practice, and also with the aim in the future. And yeah, like we talked about recreational use. Like, what's recreational use? Having fun with your friends. Okay, some people can't understand how to, or they might not do that in a safe setting, but that's just through lack of education. We haven't talked about drugs enough and explained to people, if you take MDMA, you lose part of that fear inside of you. So, you know, remember to have someone sober with you. So if you go climbing up a bit of stage scaffolding, like, you know, you've got someone sober there. Like, it's just like alcohol. And it's just because we don't have this education. Like, recreational drug use at festivals is across the country. Hundreds of thousands of people do it because there is benefit to our health. I'm not saying that that's what we advocate, but I'm saying, like, you know, we shouldn't feel shame if we've used that in the past. But this is about education and research and moving forward with the right intention and keeping that, you know, sacred and with morals and ethics like behind it. I just don't feel any shame for any sort of thing that you've done in the past to help with your pain, because I just think you invalidate your own journey.
I think that's a brilliant way to end it, and it's been really eye-opening for all of us, especially myself. Dan Laughton, the director, was meant to be on this panel as well, but he got called away for a shoot, unfortunately. But I think to end this, I did a short interview with him. It's 8 minutes long, so I will share my screen and play that, and then after that, the meeting will end. But guys, thank you all so much. It's been really, really fascinating and honest, and I think everyone's really enjoyed it. And it's a great documentary, I think. Dan, someone put in the chat, but asking if he could share the link with friends and family. Dan's happy for that to happen. He wants to get people to watch it, as long as it's not posted just publicly or online. Do pass it on to people that you feel would benefit from it, and I'll pop the link back in the chat once more. But yeah, that's all from me, really, other than just
Thanks, Casper.
Thank you again.
Well done, Casper.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks, Casper.
So I'm here with Director of Breaking Through, Dan Laughton. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
Hello.
So first of all, can you just tell us a bit about your professional background, how you got into this field, and the sort of summary of your work so far?
Yeah, so I always wanted to sort of work in film. I didn't really know what sort of thing I wanted to go into. So obviously went to uni and found my feet in documentary was the kind of thing for me all those years ago. I've been working at sort of large platforms for the last 5-ish years, making documentaries, branded pieces, things like that. That's my professional background. I've been making lots of short docs in the background pretty much constantly throughout, trying to get into festivals, things like that. I started a magazine about 2 years ago, just about people doing what they love to do. It's photo and written, and now it's sort of launching online as a bit of a video series, which I'm kind of working on in the background as well, which is great. So yeah, it's all kind of documentary and people, I think, are my main things.
Nice, that sounds really good. What's the name of that magazine?
Zeal.
Zeal.
Yeah, Zeal magazine.
A-L?
Z-E-A-L, yeah.
Nice, I'll have a look at that. And so in terms of this film, how did you come to meet Guy, and how did this project come about?
So I was working on a branded thing, and we were casting a army specialist. So we were talking to some army specialists, casting people, and they actually brought up Guy's name, and he sent in a little video with a really brief overview, now looking back, of what he does and how his story sort of goes. It didn't work for the branded thing. That actually got pulled in the end. The branded thing didn't go ahead, but I wanted to carry on sort of talking with Guy and see if he'd be up for something. I knew there was something in what he did and his story. So it drew me in. I asked Guy if he wanted to have a phone call, and Guy was really keen and up for it. Just, he was really open and up for telling his story, and sort of, it was the tip of the iceberg when we started chatting, and there's all these other layers. So yeah, big respect to Guy for actually opening up like that, especially after everything he's been through and things.
Yeah, he's a great storyteller. It's always impressive to see how sort of open and forthcoming he is.
Yeah, I think it's the personal story showing the sort of bigger picture. It's like a sort of representation of what things could be like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So going into the project, what were your hopes and expectations? What did you envisage the film to be, and did it live up to that, or was it different?
I think going into the project initially, very similar, like I just said, it's sort of a bigger picture through Guy's personal story, where his story can kind of open people's minds to a grand sort of overall perspective, I guess. So I never envisioned it would get as sort of deep into Guy's story as it did, and I'm so happy it did, because it just kept developing as we were going, and obviously we built up a bit of a rapport and things like that for Guy to open up, and yeah, I think it went further than I thought it would, which is a really, really good thing for the film.
Did you have any prior knowledge of psychedelics and psychedelic therapy before you started filming?
Very little. In terms of psychedelic therapy, I knew there was sort of, you know, ayahuasca and things like that, but never in sort of where it's actually at now, and how big the UK are as a part of sort of testing and research and things like that. So yeah, in that sense, it was little, but I was very interested. It's an interesting topic. And then when Guy and I were in conversation, and it was like PTSD meets psychedelics, I think those two worlds colliding was something I was really interested in.
And obviously you spoke to Dr. Ben Sessa as well in the film, as well as an underground therapist. How did you get in touch with them, and what was it like talking to them?
I mean, talking to the both of them was really interesting, hearing one person who sort of does it underground, and someone who's very much at like their faces at the front of it kind of thing. So I think that was really interesting, hearing two different views that all have the same point. It's just a matter of sort of legal situations, and I guess training as well. But yeah, they were both really, really great, actually. I really, really enjoyed spending time with both of them.
Yeah, all three of the people who feature in the film have a very special way of speaking and delivering, which is, the whole film came across really understated, and there's a kind of tendency within psychedelics to kind of sensationalize and have these like grand narratives, but I really enjoyed how sort of down to earth and understated it was. I think you did that really well. Yeah,
I think I kind of went into the film wanting it to be shown to the people who, like that group of people, or that type of person who doesn't believe it's a positive thing, or even open to the fact that psychedelics can help people. So I think I always had that in the back of my mind, that I wanted it made for those people to show the other side. And sort of there's a lot of things along the way where, you, like you say, you could sort of sensationalize some bits and things like that, which would elevate maybe a certain point of view from these viewers, and sort of switch them off, as opposed to making them understand, draw them in.
Yeah, I mean, Guy talks about his parents' reaction at one point, which was very striking, in that he'd had this transformational, really positive experience and didn't feel able to properly talk about it and to share it with other people, because they thought that it was just a drug experience.
Yeah, that's like the way that people have been drilled in, and it's a big thing in terms of perspective and generational, you know, it's sort of going with that generation, and there's all that sort of thing. Yeah.
So coming up in the future, what's on your radar now? What projects have you got lined up?
I'm working on a few short docs, maybe about like 10 minutes long, a couple for Zeal, actually, to sort of launch the online-y side of it. mainly on people who have sort of followed their passion, sort of like a sports person, or there's some sort of drag racing sort of thing going on in the east of England. I'm also looking at short doc when I'm able to actually film with them on a para ice hockey team.
Oh, wow.
There's, in Sheffield, they've got sort of one of the UK's top teams. They're not quite at international standards yet, but all of them have sort of been through different traumas, and yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really good, interesting film, that. So lots of little shorts. Also got some long form pitches I'm trying to get out there off the back of this film, you know, as sort of, as you say, marketing, things like that go. You want to have those long form pitches ready. I think the long form stuff is the next sort of break for me. So
that all sounds good. That ice hockey team story sounds like a really,
yeah, I think that'll be a really strong one. Like everyone's got their own individual stories, and they all sort of come together in this team, and it's almost like a family for them, especially after everything. They've obviously not been able to be on the ice with their friends and stuff. So with that support system for them returning, it'll be great.
You certainly covered this one really well. It's a brilliant documentary.
Thank you.
I said
really,
when
really
I saw it,
enjoyed
it's probably the best I've seen about psychedelics, and it's awesome that you're sharing it for free as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The more eyes on it, the better.
Yeah.
I hope everyone enjoys it and gets something from it as well.
Thanks.